Dragon Emperor Sun Chapter 171 to Chapter 180. When he got off work in the afternoon, Wang Hanan didn't take David's car to go home, but took a taxi and left. "This girl, what happened today?" David muttered in a low voice. He felt that Wang Hanan had no energy all afternoon, and did not speak to himself. After returning home, David simply changed his clothes, and Sonia drove the car to pick him up. In this dilapidated community, there was a luxury car parked at the door, which instantly attracted the attention of many people. "Whose rich lady is this? Why are you driving to our broken community? Wouldn't it be because of the young man in the community? People have money at a glance, how can they look at the boys in our community?" At the gate of the community, there was a group of old ladies sitting, chatting about nothing. Wang Chongfeng was among them, and she was very curious as to who the car was coming to pick up. But when she saw that David actually came out of the community and got into the car, she was stunned. "Chongfeng, isn't that young man David from Baokuo? He found a rich woman and girlfriend. I remember that David has a good relationship with your Hanin. What's going on? Young people today are all greedy for vanity." Several old ladies were nagging, and Wang Chongfeng was in a hurry to go home. She wanted to ask her daughter what the H3LL was going on. David got into Sonia's car and went all the way to a suburb of Horindal according to the address given by Gu Wenchen. This place has not yet been developed, there are low-rise bungalows everywhere, and the roads are not very good. After more than an hour, David arrived at the place, and at this time Gu Wenchen was already waiting. David looked at this place and couldn't believe Gu Wenchen's identity, that there were still friends in such a place. "Mr. Chen." Seeing David arriving, Gu Wenchen greeted him very politely. And beside Gu Wenchen, there is also an old man with white temples, but this old man's aura and clothes are very different from Gu Wenchen. "Old Song, this is the Mr. Chen I told you. He is very skilled in medicine," Gu Wenchen said to the old man beside him. When Lao Song saw David, he was stunned for a moment, and his face was full of incredible expressions. In his impression, the person who was honored by Gu Wenchen as a gentleman, and who has excellent medical skills, must be an old professor, an old expert, etc., but he did not expect David to be so young, speaking of a child. "Lao Song, Lao Song!" Gu Wenchen shouted 2 more times to the dazed Lao Song. "Oh!" Lao Song reacted, and hurriedly stretched out his dry and wrinkled hands, and said to David, "Hello, Mr. Chen." David shook hands with Lao Song, nodded slightly, and said hello. "Mr. Chen, Lao Song's daughter-in-law is in the house, can you help me take a look?" Gu Wenchen said, "Let Lao Song lead the way." And Gu Wenchen followed David side by side, and at the same time explained his relationship with Lao Song. It turns out that Gu Wenchen followed Lao Song to a young age. When Gu Wenchen was a child, he also lived in this low-rise bungalow. It has been several decades. Later, Gu Wenchen went to school and walked out of here, and slowly he entered the political world again, and there were not many contacts with some old friends from the past. After Gu Wenchen retired, he returned to Horindal and got in touch with his former friends. Gu Wenchen once wanted to help Lao Song get out of here and buy a house in the city, but Lao Song was reluctant to leave here. Asking the gods is over. The two often drank tea and chatted together. Although Lao Song lived a poorer life, he lived a fulfilling life. He never asked Gu Wenchen, but just a few days ago, Lao Song found Gu Wenchen and wanted Gu Wenchen to give it to him. "Find a famous doctor to treat your wife." After all, Gu Wenchen has a wide network of contacts and a great face, so it is not difficult to find a doctor with excellent medical skills, but after Gu Wenchen heard about Lao Song's wife's condition, he immediately guessed that Lao Song's wife should not be as simple as getting sick. "So I found David." Soon, under the guidance of Lao Song, David and the others arrived at a small courtyard. The courtyard was very small, with only 3 brick and tile houses. There were chickens and ducks in the corner of the courtyard. There was an unpleasant smell in the air. odor. As soon as she entered the yard, Sonia frowned slightly and covered her nose and mouth. Sonia, who seldom comes to this kind of place, can't stand the smell, but David didn't feel anything. After all, he also lived in the countryside for 10 years. A few years later, I followed my mother to the city. As soon as David and the others entered the room, they heard a woman crying in the room on the left. The voice was shrill, especially scary. "Ah! I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. I'm the Queen Mother now, and I'm going to sentence you to death." The woman's voice was crying and making trouble, making Sonia pale with fright, and clutching David's sleeve tightly with one hand, she regretted coming with her. Lao Song opened the door on the left and saw an old woman in her 60s, already full of white hair and a wrinkled face, who was screaming madly. There was only one bed in the room and nothing else, and the old woman jumped onto the bed immediately after seeing someone come in. "Who are you? Dare to break into my palace, I will arrest you!" The old woman roared with wide eyes. "Wife, I'm looking for someone to come over to see your doctor, don't make trouble anymore." The husband used to comfort his wife. But who knew that the old woman stepped forward and bit Lao Song fiercely, and then ran to the corner. "Hey!" Seeing this, Lao Song sighed helplessly. "How long has your wife been like this? Has she been crazy all the time?" David asked Lao Song. "It's been 7 or 8 days, it's not always like this, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but now the good times are getting less and less," Lao Song said with a sad face. "I heard Gu Gu said that you came back after going to the cemetery, and your wife is like this?" David continued to ask. Lao Song nodded, "Yes, my wife always said she missed her son a few days ago, so I took her to the cemetery to have a look, but who knew it would be like this at night?" "Mr. Chen, Lao Song's son died a few years ago because of an accident," Gu hurriedly explained to David. David looked at Lao Song and his wife, and there was a burst of pity in his heart. Losing a child at an old age is the saddest thing. "Did anything strange happen after you went to the cemetery?" David asked. Lao Song thought for a while, then shook his head, "No, everything is quite normal, nothing happened." "Mr. Chen, could Lao Song's wife be a ghost?" Gu Gu asked in a low voice. "I'll take a look at it first." After David finished speaking, he took out a cloth bag with rows of silver needles inside. Soon, David took out a silver needle and walked towards the old woman in the corner. Seeing this, Lao Song hurriedly stood in front of David. "You have to be careful, don't let my wife hurt you, she no longer recognizes people." "Don't worry, nothing will happen." David smiled slightly. When David was in front of the old woman suddenly rushed towards David and was about to bite. The silver needle in David's hand stabbed into the old woman's neck, and the old woman was stunned, and then lay down on the bed with a thud. Seeing this, Lao Song hurried up and shook his wife vigorously. Seeing that his wife was motionless, Lao Song became anxious in an instant, and immediately shouted at David, "What did you do to my wife? Is she dead?" Lao Song was very excited, and it seemed that he was going to do something to David. Seeing this, Gu Wenchen hurriedly stepped forward to stop Lao Song. "Lao Song, Mr. Chen is treating your wife, what are you doing?" "Don't worry, your wife just passed out and will be fine." After David finished speaking, he sat directly on the bed and put one hand on the old woman's pulse, and then a pure spiritual power was transmitted from David's body to the old woman's body. If the old woman is a ghost, David's spiritual power will definitely be able to force the ghost out, but unfortunately, no matter how David increases the transmission of spiritual power, the old woman is motionless and has no reaction at all. David frowned slightly. Could it be that I made a mistake? At first, David also thought that the old woman was a ghost, and he only needed to force the ghost out, and then absorb and refine it by himself, but now the old woman doesn't seem to be a ghost. "Mr. Chen." Gu Wenchen saw that there was no movement for a long time, and David's expression was a little wrong, so he called out softly, At this time, Sonia also bravely stood behind David. Although she was afraid, she was still curious to see what the ghost looked like. But for a long time, there was no movement at all, and the atmosphere in the whole room became a little embarrassing. David slowly retracted his hand, and there were faint sweat stains on his forehead. He just used too much spiritual power, making him feel a little tired. "She's not hysterical, I'm checking the others." After David finished speaking, he picked up the silver needle and gently stabbed it in the old woman's wrist, and then slowly twisted it. Soon, almost all the silver needles pierced into the old woman's wrist. After a while, David took out the silver needle, and at this time, a drop of black blood came out from the old woman's wrist. Seeing the black blood coming out of the old woman, everyone was shocked, especially the old Song, who was nervous and wanted to speak, but was afraid of disturbing David. "Mr. Chen, what's going on?" Gu Wenchen was also a little confused. How could a normal person have black blood? This is a symptom of poisoning. It seems that the neurological disorder caused by poisoning, so it is crazy. David explained. Poisoning. Gu was stunned for a moment, then looked at Lao Song and said, "Lao Song, what did your wife eat before she got sick? How could she be poisoned?" Lao Song frowned and thought about it carefully, then shook his head. "I didn't eat anything. When I came back from the cemetery, I just ate a simple meal, and I also ate the meal. Why didn't I get poisoned?" This time, Gu Wenchen didn't know how to explain it, so he could only look at David. "Remember, after your wife went to the cemetery, did she eat or drink anything, including wild fruits and weeds, or did she touch anything?" David asked Lao Song solemnly. No, I didn't touch anything." It's just that when Lao Song answered, his eyes were dodging, and he didn't dare to look directly at David. Seeing Lao Song like that, David knew that he must be lying. Since the other party is unwilling to tell the truth, even if David takes pity on them, there is no way to heal them. "Since that's the case, you should invite Gao Ming, I can't see this disease." David packed up the silver needles and prepared to leave. This time, Lao Song was a little panicked, and Gu Wenchen also saw that Lao Song seemed to be hiding something, so he roared at Lao Song, "Lao Song, I asked Mr. Chen to treat your wife, but you still, to be honest, are you planning to let your wife die?" Lao Song looked embarrassed, looked at his wife on the bed, and finally gritted his teeth. "We did see something in the cemetery, and then my wife picked it up at home." "What?" Gu Wenchen and David asked in unison. "It's a Ganodermalocytum, it looks very big, like a wild Ganodermalocytum, but it's a little different from other Ganodermalocytum. My wife thinks this thing must be very valuable, so she brought it back." Lao Song said with an embarrassed look on his face. "Where's the thing? Show it to me," David said. Lao Song nodded, walked out of the room, and soon came with a large glass bottle in his hand. In the glass bottle, there is indeed something that is exhausted from Ganodermalocytum, but this Ganodermalocytum does not look like a plant. "What kind of lingzi is this? It's clearly a pile of rotten meat." After Sonia saw the contents of the glass bottle, she almost spit it out. "This is not rotten meat, it is indeed a plant, growing on the ground, but it looks like meat products." With that said, Lao Song opened the glass bottle and took out the thing. "Old Song, be careful of poison!" Gu Wenchen hurriedly shouted when he saw that Lao Song was actually going to take out something with his hands. "It's okay, I've already taken it, if it's poisonous, it'll be poisoned long ago." Lao Song didn't take it seriously, and directly took out the thing similar to Ganodermalocytum. "In that case, it's impossible for your wife to be poisoned with this kind of thing." Gu Wenchen analyzed it. Since Lao Song is fine with it, his wife can't be poisoned even if he touches it. "It's fine to touch it, but it will be poisoned if you bite it," David said, took something similar to Ganodermalocytum in Lao Song's hand, turned it over gently, and saw that at the bottom, there was a small gap on the thing, obviously it was bitten by someone. When Lao Song saw the gap, he was immediately surprised. I told her long ago that this unknown thing cannot be eaten easily, but I didn't expect that she would secretly take a bite. Let her go. Lao Song regretted it and kept beating himself. Old Song, don't blame yourself, Mr. Chen will have a solution. Gu Wenchen stopped Lao Song, then looked at David and said, Mr. Chen, what is this thing? It doesn't look like Ganoderma lucidum. David reached out and took the Lingzi-like thing in Lao Song's hand and squeezed it gently. The Lingzi-like thing seemed to move a little, as if he felt something. This is called Aconitum meat Ganoderma, also known as Ganoderma lucidum. This kind of thing will grow in places where the feng shui is strong and the turbidity is out of balance. Although this is also a plant, it has eyes like animals and can feel it. To everything in the outside world, this meat Ganoderma lucidum is called Tai Sui at one eye, and green at the second eye. As long as it grows to have all the five senses, it will become Aconitum meat Ganoderma. This kind of thing is very rare. Picked by humans, or eaten by other animals, very few can grow into shape. This thing is extremely poisonous, and it all uses underground carrion as nutrients, so it has a high chance of growing in the cemetery. Fortunately, I only took a small bite, otherwise even if the Deluo immortal descended to the world, it would not be able to save it. Don't look at this. There are few things, and there is no medicinal value. If you soak in medicinal wine, I am afraid that you will die. David explained carefully. After listening to David's words, the old Song trembled with fright. Fortunately, because his wife was ill, he didn't have time to make the medicinal wine, otherwise he would be finished. Mr. Chen, does that mean Lao Song's wife can be saved? Gu Wenchen asked in a low voice. Help me. David nodded, returned the meat Ganoderma to Lao Song, then took out the silver needle, and began to quickly tie it on Lao Song's wife. After a while, Lao Song's wife woke up, and then a mouthful of black blood spit out from her mouth. David waved his hand, took back the silver needle factor, and put it back in the cloth bag. Okay, just keep it quiet for a few days and you'll be fine. David said to Lao Song. Wife, wife. Lao Song hurriedly shouted to his wife. The old woman slowly opened her eyes, and after seeing several people in the room, she said with a confused expression, Old Song, why are there so many people in the family? Oh, it's all right, I'm here to see you. You're all right now, rest well. Seeing that his wife is really fine, Lao Song said happily. David and the others walked out of the room and into the courtyard. After Lao Song came out, he knelt down directly to David. David was stunned for a moment, and he hurriedly put one hand up to hold Lao Song up, but did not let him kneel. Benefactor, thank you for your kindness, our family has no money, and we don't know how to repay the benefactor. Lao Song kept following David to thank him. From the questioning from the beginning, Lao Song is now grateful to David. Old Song, Mr. Chen is not here for money, so you don't have to. Gu Wenchen persuaded Lao Song. If it was because of money, David would not come. Yes, yes, they are not short of money at all. Lao Song nodded again and again. After all, he saw that Sonia and David came in luxury cars, how could they be short of money? I caught a few chickens and ducks for Mr. Chen and went back to stew them. They were all raised by me and have never been fed, Lao Song said, and he was going to catch a few chickens and ducks for David. David hurriedly stopped and said, Uncle Song, don't be polite to me. If you really want to thank me, can you give me the Ganoderma lucidum? I can pay for it. Lao Song was stunned for a moment and looked at David with a puzzled face. Mr. Chen, don't you say that this thing has no medicinal value and is poisonous? What do you want this thing to do? This thing must be used in the hands of ordinary people, but I need to practice. David can just use this kind of thing in his practice. If he can absorb the essence of Ganoderma lucidum, David believes that his strength will definitely improve a lot. Since Mr. Chen is useful, I'll give it to you directly. Anyway, it's thrown away in my hands. I don't dare to stay at home. Without any hesitation, Lao Song gave David the Ganodermalocytum in his hand. David wanted to give Lao Song money, but Lao Song refused, and he didn't ask for David's money at all. After leaving the old Song family, Sonia was a little disappointed. I thought I could see some novel things, but there is nothing. Looking at Sonia's disappointed look, David smiled lightly. There are so many ghosts, but if you have a chance to see it, don't faint from fright. With you protecting me, I won't faint. Sonia smiled at David. After sending David home, Sonia left directly, and just after David went upstairs, behind a big tree in the yard of the community, Wang Hanin slowly showed his figure, looking at David's back, with mixed feelings in his heart. She had been secretly waiting for David here for a long time. She wanted to see who this woman was, but because it was too dark, Sonia didn't get out of the car, and Wang Hanin still didn't get her wish. Daughter, go home. If David really chooses a rich girl, that's also the choice of others. Wang Chongfeng gently patted Wang Hanin's shoulder and said. Yet. Wang Hanin nodded, her eyes were already wet. After David returned home, he rested early. Tomorrow Saturday, he happened to go to Pine Bay, where the spiritual energy was relatively full, and no one bothered him. He just absorbed the essence of this meat Ganodermalocytum. At the same time, in the office of General Manager Xian Hechuang, Jordan was sitting face to face with Liao Fixiang with his injured arm on his back. Master Xiao, you asked someone to contact me, what's the matter? Liao Fixiang poured a cup of tea for Jordan himself and said. After all, the Xiao family is also a wealthy family in Horindal. Although the Along gang is not afraid of the Xiao family, after all, these wealthy families are the god of wealth. Liao Fixiang knows that Jordan came today to send money. Brother Xiang, I have always heard that Brother Xiang is very powerful. When I saw him today, it really lived up to its reputation. With the muscles of Brother Xiang, 3 or 5 strong men can't stand by. Jordan touted Liao Fixiang. Haha, young Master Xiao doesn't have to be like this. If you have something to say, if I can do it, Liao will never refuse. Liao Fixiang laughed. Brother Xiang, to be honest, I have an enemy, and I want Brother Xiang to help me with revenge. After this is done, I will give you 10 million as a reward. I have 5 million here, which is a deposit. Jordan said, and pushed a bank card in front of Liao Fixiang. Ha ha ha, he is indeed a wealthy son, and his shot is really rich. Liao Fixiang was a little surprised. Jordan's shot turned out to be 10 million. But after laughing twice, Liao Fixiang suddenly stopped smiling, looked at Jordan with a dignified face and asked, I know that the Xiao family is kind to Lin Tianhu. Since you want to seek revenge on your enemy, why not look for Lin Tianhu? Besides, your Xiao family employs a lot of bodyguards, right? Are you still looking for my Along gang? Our Along gang and Juyatang have always been at odds with each other. Young Master Xiao abandoned Juyatang, but came to my Along gang. Isn't this not looking for distance? Liao Fixiang knew some of the grievances of the Xiao family following Lin Tianhu. After all, this is no secret. Humph, don't mention the ungrateful guy Lin Tianhu. If it weren't for my Xiao family, Lin Tianhu would have become a bone by now, and now Lin Tianhu has become the dog of the Sui family, and he would have cut off with Xiao Jian long ago. As soon as Jordan heard Lin Tianhu, he scolded angrily, and then said, as long as our Xiao family's bodyguards, I can't mobilize any of them, they only listen to my dad's orders. My dad still thinks I am recuperating in the hospital. He, I understand. Liao Fixiang nodded. Recently, Lin Tianhu has indeed followed the Sui family closer. Young Master Xiao's enemy will not be the second generation of officials, right? I can tell you that our Along gang has never dealt with the official family. Brother Xiang, don't worry, he's just an ordinary person, he just has some kung fu, he's not a second-generation official. Jordan quickly shook his head. That's good. Tomorrow, I will ask Shui to bring a dozen brothers to find young Master Xiao. As for how to deal with the enemy, young Master Xiao, make up your own mind. Liao Fixiang said lightly. Brother Xiang, can you send more people? Jordan asked nervously when he heard that Liao Fixiang only sent a dozen people. After all, David's strength is too strong, but he saw David knock down several people with his own eyes. What? How strong is your enemy? A dozen people are not enough. Liao Fixiang was slightly taken aback. No, it's not that strong, I just want to bring more people, isn't it more prestige? Jordan kept an eye on it. He didn't dare to follow Liao Fixiang to say that David's strength was very strong. He was afraid that Liao Fixiang would back down or ask him to pay more. Okay, since Mr. Xiao said so, then I will send 30 people to help Mr. Xiao, and I hope we can cooperate for a long time in the future. Liao Fixiang got up and shook hands with Jordan. Then thank you Brother Bear. Jordan said happily. After coming out from Xian and Zhuang, Jordan got into the car, and Delia was waiting for him in the car. Brother Lei, how's it going? Delia asked anxiously. Humph, I'll wait and see David kneeling in front of us and begging for mercy tomorrow. I'm going to stomp him underfoot and let him know how good I am. Jordan's eyes flashed with coldness, and he said proudly. Early the next morning, David told his parents and went to the Pinarist Villa with Rolling Z. At this time, at the entrance of the Pinarist Villa area, Kui Ziwen, Sun Xiaomeng and Wang Lanlan were arguing with the security guard at the entrance. Why don't you let us in? We're here to buy a house, is that how you treat your clients? Sun Xiaomeng roared loudly at the security guard. I was in a very good mood. I came to see the house in Pine Bay. If the commission is down, I can make a down payment here. Although I can't buy a villa on the mountain, I can get a loan for a house at the foot of the mountain. But who knew that when they got here, the security did not let them in, which made Sun Xiaomeng very angry. If you buy a house, you can go to the sales office next door. You can't go in until you become the owner. The security guard said to Sun Xiaomeng indifferently. How can we buy it if we don't go in to see the house type? Sun Xiaomeng is still arguing. If you want to see the house, you can bring it in with the salesman, you can't go in alone. This is our rule. The security is still blocking the door to prevent them from entering. Xiaomeng, forget it, let's go to the sales office first, and then let the salesman bring it in. Kui Ziwen pulled Sun Xiaomeng and said. Although Kui Ziwen was also angry, he didn't dare to make trouble. This is Pine, the best community in the whole Horindal. All the big people live here. He is a small department manager, how dare he make trouble here? Seeing this, Sun Xiaomeng could only glared at the security guard and said, wait, when I become the owner, let the property manager fire you first. The three of Kui Ziwen left and went to the sales office, but the security guard sneered, what, you really take yourself as a character? Not long after Kui Ziwen and the others left the door, David drove over, his second-hand Chang'an. After the security guard saw David's car from a distance, he immediately waved his hand to signal David to stop. These security guards have been working in Pine Bay for some time, and they have never seen the owners who live here, and some drive Chang'an cars. David stopped the car, and a security guard ran over quickly, wanting to ask what David did. But when David rolled down the car window, the security guard was stunned when he saw David. It took a while to react. It turned out to be Mr. Chen. I'm really sorry. David has been living in the villa on the top of the mountain some time ago. You must know that the villa is the most expensive in the entire Pine Bay, so these security guards know David. It's okay. David smiled lightly. Soon, the security guard waved his hand, hurry up and open the door, it's Mr. Chen. When the security guard at the door heard that it was David, he hurriedly opened the door. When David drove past, the security guards hurriedly saluted. But just as David's car was about to enter the door, suddenly a red Maserati rushed in front of David, trying to surpass David and enter the community. David failed to brake and hit the rear end of the Maserati directly, which made several security guards a little dumbfounded. None of them thought that a car would suddenly rush over and a car accident happened. This is at the gate of the community. When such a thing happens, these security guards are responsible, so these security guards are looking at the red Maserati angrily. How the H3LL did you drive? A broken Chang'an car dares to hit my car? Do you know how much my car costs? A woman wearing sunglasses and a fashionable straw hat on her head got out of the car, watched her beloved car get hit, and cursed directly at David. Originally, David wanted to settle the matter calmly. It was the other party's fault. He even overtaken the car at a place like the gate of the community. It's obvious that you came in front of you suddenly, why do you blame me for hitting your car? David questioned the woman. What? You broke Chang'an, what's in the doorway? Can you come to this place? The woman looked at David with contempt, and then shouted at several security guards, how do you all keep watch? Can such a car be put in the community? It's too embarrassing for our community, and it also smears the faces of our owners. Several security guards looked at the arrogant woman and dared not speak out. After all, they were security guards and could not provoke the woman in front of them. David looked at the arrogant look of the woman and wanted to slap her twice, but he thought that he had to hurry up to practice and was unwilling to waste time, so he said to the woman, tell me how much it costs. I don't have time to talk to you here. Seeing that David was still a little impatient, the woman immediately raised her voice and said, do you know how much my car is worth? It's more than 2 million. If you hit this, it won't be repaired without 10 or 200,000 yuan. It's not enough to pay me for the car. Don't talk nonsense, just say the number. David frowned slightly. You dare to say nonsense to me? Believe it or not, old lady. As the woman said, she raised her hand and wanted to slap David, but David grabbed it and slapped the woman in the face. The woman flew out with the sunglasses, and even the straw hat on her head flew, which made the arrogant woman stunned. She never thought that David would dare to do something to herself. Where did a person who broke Chang'an have the courage? Good boy, you dare to hit me, I won't kill you today, my mother is not finished. The woman growled, took out her phone and started calling. When several security guards saw David beat the woman, they felt relieved for a while, but they also knew that this action would make things worse, and a security guard hurried to call the property manager. The woman finished the phone call, and then glared at David with those phoenix eyes, boy, wait for me, my husband will come and hack you to death. I don't have time to write with you here, if you don't move the car, I'll knock you out. David doesn't want to be entangled with women. He hasn't practiced well in this period of time. David needs to hurry up and practice. How dare you hit my car? You can hit it if you can, and I won't let you go bankrupt. The woman yelled. She didn't believe that David really dared to bump. This is $1 million luxury car, and David can't afford it. Seeing the woman like that, David knew that it was useless to say anything, so he got in the car and prepared to knock the Maserati in front of him away. But at this moment, Kui Zaiwan and the others were brought over by a sales lady, ready to go in to see the house. David! After seeing David, Sun Xiaomeng shouted in surprise. After all, not everyone can come to this place. People like David who have no money or power rarely come here, but I don't know what David is doing here. Seeing that it was Sun Xiaomeng and Kui Zaiwan, David asked casually, why are you here? Why are you still asking us? Why are you here? We are here to buy a house. What are you doing here? Kui Zaiwan looked at David with contempt, and then at David's car following in front of him. The Maserati collided with each other, and immediately gloated, David, your driving skills are not good, why did you crash? Do you want to break in behind other people's cars? At this time, Wang Lanlin also found that David's car collided with other people's cars, and it was a Maserati, and suddenly screamed, "David, you have won the lottery, you can't hit any car, but you hit a Maserati, this car costs several million, and your car insurance probably won't cover it. If I can afford it, I won't bother you, it's my own business," David said coldly. "David, I can tell you that it is impossible for the company to pay you early wages. You are driving around in a broken car, and now you are afraid that your family will go bankrupt." The corners of Kui Ziwen's mouth raised high, unable to hide the excitement on his face. "David, what the H3LL is going on? You're in trouble now." Sun Xiaomeng frowned slightly and asked David. "It's nothing serious, didn't it just crash and get off?" David smiled lightly, in his eyes, "This is nothing at all." "Crash and get off the car? Please widen your eyes, what kind of car is this hitting? This is a Maserati, a car worth millions, do you understand?" Wang Lanlin sneered. "David, I advise you to ride an electric car at ordinary times. You are not suitable for driving. If you hit a Maserati today and a Porsche tomorrow, even if you sell it, you won't be able to afford it." Kui Ziwen persuaded David earnestly, but his eyes were full of playfulness. At this time, the woman on the other side saw that Kui Ziwen and the others were sneering at David, and she was even more convinced that David was just a useless guy with no skills, so she shouted, "Boy, aren't you crazy? My car was knocked away, if you have the ability, you can hit it." The woman is provoking David, constantly stimulating David. David was too lazy to talk nonsense with him, so he got into the car and planned to knock the Maserati away. "David, you're crazy, come down here." Sun Xiaomeng grabbed David and said, "Do you know how much this car is worth? If you hit it on impulse, even if you go bankrupt, you won't be able to afford to sell the house." Sun Xiaomeng didn't want to take care of David, but when it happened to such a big thing as Maserati, Sun Xiaomeng couldn't help but ask, "This is going to cost a lot of money. Borrow money? Xiaomeng, what do you care about him? Isn't he awesome? Let him hit it, and if he can't afford it, let him go to jail, anyway, it's not like he hasn't done it." Kui Ziwen's face was cold, and he was very dissatisfied with Sun Xiaomen stopping David. "If you really hit it, it will cost you millions. It's not a joke. Even if the David family sells the house, they can't afford it. What will you ask his parents to do then?" Sun Xiaomeng glared at Kui Ziwen and said. Although Sun Xiaomeng doesn't like David, and doesn't like David's family very much, after all, in her heart, the David family is just looking at her family's wealth, and deliberately came to curry favor with her. But it doesn't mean that Sun Xiaomeng wants David's family to be destroyed. When Kui Ziwen saw that Sun Xiaomeng was actually protecting David, his eyes were full of anger. David glanced at Sun Xiaomeng, and his opinion of Sun Xiaomeng changed a lot in his heart. It seems that this Sun Xiaomeng is not particularly bad. Right at this moment, two vans came swiftly, followed by a dozen or so vicious big men with sticks in their hands. "Husband," the woman ran towards a man in sportswear, and then said coquettishly, "Husband, someone hit me just now, look at my face." The man looked at the woman's face, and suddenly became angry, his face became cold and said, "Who the H3LL beat my wife, stand up for me." David took 2 steps forward, "I hit it." The man glanced at David, then looked at Kui Ziwen and the others behind David, and said coldly, "Boy, you kneel in front of my wife to apologize, I may still save your life, otherwise, just the few of you, don't even try to run away." When Kui Ziwen heard this, the man actually regarded them and David as being together, and he waved his hands in fright to explain, Big brother, you misunderstood, we are not together, although we know each other, but what he did, I don't know at all." The man looked at his wife, the woman nodded and said, "Just this kid, he not only hit my car, but also slapped me. Boy, let's just count the car crash. You slap my wife, and if you kneel now, you can still survive. The man looked at David with murderous expression. David smiled lightly. Do you guys particularly like people to kneel? But let me tell you, I can't kneel anyone except my parents, and you don't deserve me to kneel. Boy, what did you say? The man was stunned for a moment, and then burst into anger. He couldn't believe that David alone, facing so many people, had the courage to say such a thing. David, are you crazy? You are courting death. Sun Xiaomeng reprimanded David loudly. And Kui Ziwen said with a sneer on his face, David, this time has come, so don't pretend to be forceful. Even if you kneel down, we won't laugh at you, let alone pass it on to you in the company. That's right, we won't say it, just kneel down, or you'll be beaten up in a while, and you'll still have to kneel down. Wang Lanlin also smiled and said. You guys like to kneel so much, you can kneel, David said to Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin. Humph, if you have the ability, continue to be mad, and see who will kneel and beg for mercy later. Kui Ziwen snorted coldly. The man saw that David was very strong, so he didn't kneel at all, and said with a cold face, Boy, you have some bones, but when you meet me today, no matter how hard you are, I will make you soft. After speaking, the man waved his hand and said, Give it to me, let him be abolished. Soon, more than a dozen people rushed towards David. When Kui Ziwen and the others saw this, they were so frightened that they hurried to hide far away. Although Sun Xiaomeng was anxious, she couldn't take care of it at this time. Stop! With an angry shout, I saw a property manager in a suit rushing over with several security guards. Manager Zhang, what do you mean? Do you want to stop me? When the man saw the property manager, he asked with a displeased expression. Brother, give me a face, let's forget about today's affairs, what's the loss, I'll take care of it. The property manager said to the man with a smile on his face. It seems that two people know each other. After all, one is the owner and the other is the property manager. It is not surprising that they know each other. Manager Zhang, did you take the wrong medicine today or is this kid your relative? How can you plead for him? The man asked in confusion. After Manager Zhang looked at David, he slowly leaned into the man's ear and said, Brother, you don't know, this Mr. Chen lives in a villa on the top of the mountain. He has lived there for a while. When the man heard it, he was stunned. Isn't that the Sui family's villa? That's right, since he can live in, he must have something to do with the Sui family. Manager Zhang nodded. The man glanced at David, his eyes full of disbelief. I don't believe that this kid has anything to do with the Sui family, just like him, I'm afraid he can't fight with the Sui family, and drives a car to break Chang'an, how could he follow Su? My family has something to do with it, Manager Zhang. Don't lie to me, it won't give you face today. The man didn't believe it at all. How could David be related to the richest man Su's family in his clothes and the Chang'an car?